Whatever you just did proves you're built different, and they're absolutely shocked. You probably did not think much of it when it happened. In fact, there is a good chance you almost dismissed it completely. But the moment you made that choice, the moment you responded differently than you once would have, something became impossible to ignore. Not because the world suddenly stopped and applauded you, not because anyone announced it, but because the people who have been quietly observing your journey noticed a shift they never expected to see. What you just did revealed something about you that has been developing beneath the surface for a very long time. And whether you realize it or not, it left some people completely stunned. Stay with this, because there is something important here. The truth is that most people expect you to remain the version of yourself they became comfortable with. They learn your patterns. They memorize your reactions. They assume that tomorrow's version of you will be identical to yesterday's version. That is why your recent action caught them off guard. Maybe it was something you said. Maybe it was something you refused to say. Maybe it was a situation where you chose peace instead of proving a point. Whatever it was, it carried a quiet strength that cannot be faked. The kind of strength that appears only after someone has spent countless nights questioning themselves, rebuilding themselves, and growing in ways nobody else could see. What shocked them was not the action itself. What shocked them was the person it revealed. For a long time, growth in your life may have felt invisible. You kept moving forward, but there were days when it seemed like nothing was changing. You worked on yourself privately. You learned lessons without announcing them. You carried disappointments without turning them into your identity. And because so much of your transformation happened internally, even you may have underestimated how far you had come. But growth has a strange way of revealing itself. One ordinary moment arrives, and suddenly everyone can see evidence of years of inner work. The calmness you showed, the patience you displayed, the confidence you carried without needing validation. These things did not appear overnight. They were earned through experiences that nobody else fully understands. What makes this moment so powerful is that it is only the beginning of a larger realization. The people who underestimated your resilience are starting to notice something different. The people who assumed they had you figured out are beginning to question those assumptions. And perhaps most importantly, a part of you is finally starting to recognize your own evolution. Not through praise, not through attention, but through the simple awareness that you are no longer reacting to life the way you once did. That awareness changes everything, and what becomes clear next may reveal an even deeper reason why this recent moment left so many people absolutely shocked. There comes a moment in every person's journey when the evidence can no longer be hidden. And strangely enough, that moment rarely feels dramatic while it is happening. It often arrives quietly, disguised as a simple decision, a small act of restraint, or a response that feels almost ordinary. Yet what happened recently was anything but ordinary. The reason people are so surprised is not because you suddenly became someone new. It is because they are finally seeing who you have been becoming all along. They expected old reactions, old doubts, and old habits. Instead, they encountered a version of you that seemed unfamiliar, stronger, and far more grounded than they remembered. Don't miss what comes next, because this realization runs deeper than most people understand. What many people fail to recognize is that real transformation is rarely loud. Movies teach us to expect dramatic breakthroughs, but life usually works differently. Growth happens in silence. It happens during the days nobody celebrates. It happens when you choose discipline over comfort, self-respect over approval, and patience over immediate gratification. The people around you often miss these invisible moments because they are not living inside your mind. They do not see the private battles you have fought or the difficult choices you have made when nobody was watching. So when the results finally become visible, it feels sudden to them, But to you, this moment is the product of countless unseen victories that have been accumulating for far longer than anyone realizes. There is also another reason your recent action caught people off guard. Deep down, many individuals become attached to the roles they assign others. Once they decide who you are, they expect you to stay there. It makes their world easier to predict. But growth disrupts those expectations. When you begin operating from a place of greater clarity, confidence, or emotional balance, it challenges the image they have been holding on to. Suddenly, their assumptions no longer fit. They notice that certain comments no longer affect you. Certain situations no longer pull you into unnecessary drama. Certain opportunities no longer intimidate you. And without saying a word, you communicate something powerful. You have changed in ways that cannot be reversed. The most remarkable part is that this shift is not about impressing anyone. In fact, the people who are built differently rarely realize the impact they are having while it is happening. They are too focused on becoming better than they were yesterday. That is why your recent choice carried so much weight. It was authentic. It was natural. It came from a place that no longer needs constant validation. And as this new chapter continues to unfold, you may begin noticing subtle signs that others are seeing you differently too. Not because you demanded attention, but because your presence now carries a quiet certainty that cannot be ignored. And the deeper truth behind that certainty may be the very thing that changes how you see yourself from this point forward. The fascinating thing about personal growth is that the biggest changes are often recognized by other people before you fully recognize them yourself. While you were busy navigating life, dealing with responsibilities, overcoming disappointments, and simply trying to keep moving forward, something inside you was quietly being refined. You were becoming less dependent on external approval and more connected to your own sense of direction. That shift may sound small, but it changes everything. It changes the way you enter a room. It changes the way you handle uncertainty. It changes the energy you bring into conversations. And recently, someone noticed it. Maybe several people did. They may not even have the words to explain what feels different about you, but they can sense it. Stay with this, because what they are noticing reveals something important about the path you have been walking. One of the clearest signs that you are evolving is when you stop needing every question to have an immediate answer. There was a time when uncertainty felt uncomfortable. You wanted clarity right away. You wanted reassurance. You wanted proof that things were moving in the right direction. But somewhere along the way, you developed a deeper trust in yourself. Not a perfect trust, not a fearless trust, a real one. The kind that allows you to keep going even when every detail has not been revealed. That quiet confidence is rare. Many people spend their lives searching for certainty before taking action. You, however, have started learning how to move forward while uncertainty still exists. And that ability creates a strength that others find both surprising and inspiring. What truly catches people off guard is how naturally this strength now appears. You are not trying to convince anyone of anything. You are not performing confidence. You are not forcing growth to be visible. In fact, some of your most powerful changes are still hidden beneath the surface. Yet there is something unmistakable about a person who has learned valuable lessons through experience. Their words carry more weight. Their silence becomes more meaningful. Their decisions become more intentional. Even their setbacks begin to look different because they no longer allow temporary difficulties to define their entire story. People notice this shift even if they cannot explain it. They see someone who has become steadier, wiser, and more self-aware, and it challenges everything they thought they knew. The beautiful part is that none of this happened overnight. It was built through moments that seemed insignificant at the time. Small choices, quiet reflections, days when progress felt invisible. times when you kept showing up despite not knowing where the road was leading. Looking back, those moments were shaping you far more than you realized. They were preparing you to become someone who responds to life differently, someone who carries a deeper sense of perspective and purpose. And as you continue moving forward, another realization is beginning to emerge. The people who are shocked by your growth are only seeing the results. What they cannot yet see is how much potential still remains undiscovered within you. And that realization may be even more powerful than everything that has happened so far. Sometimes the most extraordinary thing about a person is not what they achieve, but what they quietly refuse to become. While many people focus on visible success, there is another kind of victory that often goes unnoticed. It is the decision to remain kind after disappointment. It is the choice to stay hopeful after uncertainty. It is the ability to keep your heart open, even when life gives you every reason to close it. Somewhere along your journey, you began making these choices more often than you realize. They were not dramatic moments. No audience was watching. Yet each decision was shaping your character in ways that are now becoming impossible to hide. That is one reason people seem so surprised. They expected life to harden you. Instead, it strengthened you. There is a quiet difference between someone who has merely survived difficult experiences and someone who has learned from them. Surviving keeps you moving. Learning transforms the way you move. Recently, your actions revealed that transformation. You handled something with a level of maturity that could only come from experience. You approached a situation with patience when impatience would have been easier. You trusted your own judgment instead of rushing to seek approval from everyone around you. These moments may have felt small, but they carried enormous meaning. They showed that your growth is no longer something happening inside you. It is beginning to influence the way you interact with the world. There's something important here because this is where many people first start realizing they have become stronger than they once imagined. What makes your journey especially meaningful is that much of it happened during periods when nobody was paying attention. Growth is often romanticized as a series of breakthroughs, but real growth usually feels much quieter. It happens when you choose to keep going after a setback. It happens when you decide not to give up on yourself during a season of doubt. It happens when you continue becoming the person you want to be, even when there is no immediate reward. Those unseen moments matter more than most people realize. They create a foundation that cannot be shaken by temporary circumstances. And when that foundation finally begins showing itself through your actions, people notice. They may not understand exactly what changed, but they recognize that something about you feels more solid, more centered, and more authentic than before. As this realization continues unfolding, another truth begins to emerge. The thing that makes you different is not perfection. It is your willingness to keep growing. You have not reached some final destination. You are still learning, still evolving, still discovering new parts of yourself. Yet that openness to growth is precisely what sets you apart. Many people stop evolving because they become comfortable with who they have been. You continue evolving because you remain curious about who you can become. And that curiosity is opening doors inside you that have not fully revealed themselves yet. The next part of this story is not about what others see when they look at you. It is about what you are finally beginning to see when you look at yourself. And that realization may change everything. A quiet realization is beginning to take shape, and it may be one of the most important realizations of your life. For so long, you measured yourself through unfinished goals, unanswered questions, and the distance between where you were and where you wanted to be. You focused on what still needed work. You noticed the areas where you were still learning. You paid attention to every mistake and every moment when you felt uncertain. But recently, something shifted. Perhaps only slightly, perhaps so subtly that you almost missed it. For the first time in a long while, you began to recognize not only how far you still want to go, but how far you have already come. That awareness carries a special kind of power because it changes the way you relate to yourself. When people are truly growing, they often underestimate their own progress. They become so focused on improvement that they rarely stop to acknowledge transformation. Yet if you could step outside yourself for a moment and see your journey through fresh eyes, you would notice things that once overwhelmed you but no longer do. You would notice situations that once drained your energy but now receive a calmer response. You would notice how your perspective has expanded, how your patience has deepened, and how your understanding of yourself has become more honest. These changes may not always be visible in photographs or achievements, but they are visible in the way you carry yourself through life. And that is precisely why the people around you are reacting differently. They are seeing evidence of growth that you have not fully given yourself credit for yet. There is something deeply meaningful about becoming the kind of person who no longer needs constant proof of their worth. That does not mean you never have doubts. It does not mean every day feels easy. It simply means you are beginning to trust your own journey more than you trust temporary circumstances. You are learning that your value does not disappear during difficult seasons. You are discovering that progress is not always loud, and that some of the most important developments happen beneath the surface. Stay with this, because this understanding changes the entire experience of growth. Instead of constantly chasing validation, you begin building a relationship with yourself that is rooted in respect, patience, and self-awareness. And perhaps that is the real reason people seem so shocked. They expected you to keep searching for permission. They expected you to keep questioning your own strength. They expected you to remain attached to old versions of yourself. Instead, they are witnessing someone who is gradually stepping into a deeper level of authenticity. Someone who is becoming more comfortable with who they are without needing to prove it. Someone who has started valuing inner alignment more than external approval. What they are seeing now is only a glimpse of that transformation. The deeper shift is still unfolding. And in the next part, the focus will move beyond what has changed within you to something even more profound. The unexpected impact your growth has been having on the people around you, whether they realize it or not. What many people never realize is that growth is rarely a private event. Even when your transformation happens quietly, it creates ripples that reach farther than you imagine. Every time you choose patience instead of frustration, every time you respond with wisdom instead of impulse, every time you remain true to yourself instead of shrinking to fit someone else's expectations, you influence the people around you. Most of the time, they never say a word about it. They simply observe. They notice the difference. They feel the shift. And whether they admit it or not, your growth begins challenging them to think differently about their own lives. That is one of the hidden reasons your recent actions left such a strong impression. They did not just reveal something about you. They reflected something back to everyone watching. Some people feel inspired when they witness genuine growth. They see your resilience and it reminds them of their own potential. They see your calmness and it encourages them to approach life differently. But others experience something more complicated. Not because they dislike you, but because your evolution quietly disrupts the stories they have been telling themselves. When someone has known you for a long time, they often become attached to a particular version of you. Seeing you rise beyond that version forces them to update their perspective. It reminds them that people are capable of changing, healing, and becoming more than their past. And while that realization can be beautiful, it can also be surprising. The truth is that your growth has become impossible to ignore. not because you are demanding attention, but because authenticity naturally stands out in a world where many people are still trying to figure out who they are. The most powerful part of this journey is that you did not grow by competing with anyone else. You grew by paying attention to yourself. You learned from your experiences. You listened to your inner voice when it would have been easier to follow the crowd. You kept moving forward during moments when progress felt invisible. That is why your strength feels different. It was not borrowed, it was built. It came from lessons that could not be taught in a single conversation or learned from a single success. It came from living, reflecting, adjusting, and continuing despite uncertainty. There's something important here. The qualities people admire most are often the qualities developed in seasons that nobody else ever saw. Now you are approaching a deeper understanding of what it truly means to be built differently. It is not about being better than anyone else. It is not about standing above people or proving your worth. It is about having the courage to remain connected to your growth, even when nobody is applauding. It is about trusting that every lesson, every challenge, every period of waiting has contributed something valuable to the person you are becoming. And as this realization settles into your heart, one final piece of the puzzle begins to emerge. The greatest surprise was never what others discovered about you. The greatest surprise is what you are finally beginning to discover about yourself. And that realization brings a sense of clarity that changes everything.